Data. I want everybody to stop talking about data and really learn how to use it. And that's really the purpose and the title of this podcast. And I'm really pleased to introduce Ramya Pingali. She's the founder and director of the Email Studio. Ramya, give us a background about yourself and tell the audience why they should care about what you have to say today.
Hi, like Andrew introduced, my name is Ramya. I am from Toronto. I have started doing started with Email Studio in
Yeah.
2021. It's pretty recent, but then I've been in the email field itself for close to 13 years now. So I think
Mhm.
I do have some points, if not everything, to talk about it. My
Yeah,
whole
cool.
career has been about it, and that's why I think you should listen.
Yeah. It's funny, over the years and your experience, right? We always hear this drum beating all the time around use data, use data. We should always use data to personalize or hyper personalize or individualize or whatever the flavor of the month is for the saying, right?
Yeah,
But people sometimes get paralyzed with
yeah.
how do I actually use it? So as you were sort of approach clients or over your experience, like give me an example, right? Of what people should do if they have this data. What sort of baby steps should they take?
It would all start with just defining the objectives. So you would look at the data. It could be raw. You could be a small company. You could have just very minimal data. You could be a big company with humongous data. You have teams that are working on the data and
Yep.
analyzing it and reporting it and then creating all these algorithms for you. But the key point here, if you want to use data, is to start with an objective. What do
Mm,
you want to do? You
right.
have the data, you have a campaign. What is the end objective for that campaign? And depending on that, then you can start using the data. As simple as an example would be a welcome flow. Every company wants to do a welcome flow.
Sure.
What is your objective with a welcome flow? It could be just to get the new user used to your brand. That could be a goal. So
Yeah.
your objective would be just get them acquainted with the brand. So your data that you'd be using for that kind of a campaign would be it's a new user, obviously. You don't have a lot of data on them, but you would be introducing them with your product, your services, and you're consistently educating the customer on what your brand is. If your goal for the welcome campaign is to convert a new user into an active user or a recurring user, then your data would be based on how do you want them to convert? What do you think will help them convert? That's the kind of data that you'd be using for the campaign.
Right.
And going forward, as the customer progresses in their life cycle, your objectives change and the data usage changes. That's how you should be thinking about it.
Right. And one of the things I think that people tend to overlook, right, is okay, I've got whatever sort of data. If it's a demographic data, if it's psychographic data, if it's purchase data, if it's engagement data. But as you mentioned, right, like they sort of go through this progression. If they're new people,
Yeah.
you're gathering that data, whether they engage or go to the site or
Yeah.
whatever. So that's part of just using that data to your advantage, right?
Yes.
Especially when it comes to new users or new potential customers or prospects or whatever we want
Yeah.
to classify it. What about data that we've built up over years of somebody? Tell me a little bit about, what some of the things that they should or should not use, and if they've got it.
Definitely. Definitely. I do have an example for this
Yeah,
one
yeah,
as an instance where at a company, this company has multiple service lines. They do offer these service lines in different countries as well. Long story short, we fell in trouble with GDPR because we had outsourced the email work to an agency and there was a miscommunication. So we didn't tell them these service lines don't belong in a certain country. And they ended
yeah.
up using all of the data and sent an email out to everyone. And the users that got the email did not even know the other company existed. So
Uh,
that was exactly. It was a
yeah,
classic example where we had to go in all out and then clear
yeah,
all of the doubts. But then there are three different problems here. One is when you're collecting the data, the customer wasn't clear of all the service lines that you're offering.
right,
Second, you didn't have consent. You didn't ask customer for an explicit consent to be cross-selling these other service lines that you have.
right,
Third, as a company, you did not see if the other service lines were relevant for the other users in these other geographies. If you were, then you would be going all at segmenting the customers out, keeping them separate if you don't have the consent. If you do have the consent, segmentation always helps. You can
Mhm.
always use them as a list to send to or as a list to be suppressed,
Right.
depending on the service line,
Yeah.
right? So that was a big example that
Yeah.
that I can think
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
data not to use and how not to use it.
Yeah. I kind of have a similar experience, right?
Yeah.
So how not to use the data was a few years back, one company bought another company.
Yes.
And it was one of the similar lines, but the way that they skewed that was, we noticed that you've shown interest and or purchased at X company, and we thought you might like using or purchasing data from this company. And that's like, ooh boy, that's a slippery slope, right? No matter where you're at, no matter what laws are there, it often causes confusion, because
Yeah.
let's face it, if you and I worked at those companies, we know that we bought one another, right?
Yeah.
Or that we're integrated. But the
Yeah.
average consumer, whether you're a consumer in retail or a consumer in publishing or a consumer for service related stuff, they
Yeah.
don't know. And so you kind of have to explain it. But the
Yes.
right use of data, and then I want to get to your story if you have a story around the right use of data,
Yeah.
was I was dealing with a publisher, and this publisher had all gamuts of different types of articles or verticals to do. And so what they said was, is that, hey, you've shown interest in travel, right?
Yeah.
As an example, you've read a lot of travel articles. They knew that because I've clicked on stuff and read it. Here are a couple of other newsletters or whatever that might interest you that you may or may not know about. And I thought that was kind of nice,
Yeah.
right? And in fact, I kind of skimmed it and I was like, well, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that, but I am
Yeah.
interested in this. And I didn't really know, right? And so I subscribe to it. Now, you could obviously do that through a preference center, but you could also show that you're listening. You're
Yes.
listening, and there's nothing wrong with listening to what they're doing and then leveraging that. It's not a good idea to do it. So do you have a story of how they use data correctly?
Absolutely. So I have to lean into the point about preference centers. I am a big supporter of preference centers. And
Okay.
every time I talk to a client, I do impose on the importance of knowing your user through a
Yeah.
preference center. The
Yeah.
first rule of a user giving you data is because they trust you as a brand. And when they trust you as a brand, they want to have a two-way conversation with you. That's the
Mhm.
only rule. That's the only reason why someone would want to give you their birth date, or they
Yeah.
would tell you what they're interested in, what they like about you. All of
Yeah.
that is because they just want you to, it's like a friend. When you
Yeah.
tell your personal secrets to a friend, you want the friend to empathize with you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not because they're just blocking you out and they're telling their own story. It's not all just about you.
Right.
Okay, coming back to the examples, I have a
Yeah.
very good example of the merger story that you gave me as to how bad it was for you, but how good it was for me. It was a
Okay.
complete flip.
Yeah.
Again, I worked at a company where a big it was the company that I was working was a part of a bigger company, but the company left the country.
Hmm.
So they wanted to merge the existing company with a bigger company, and the best part out of this is that we had to design their leaving country campaign to
Yeah.
their existing users. So we told the users that, since the company is leaving the country, we
Okay.
are going to move the data over to this smaller company. And in the next 30 days, if we have your consent, we will
Hmm.
start moving you over to the next company. And then these are the benefits you get from this company. These are the conveniences that you get from this company. This is the product that they use. All of that in that email. It's a big email. There's a lot of
Yeah.
story in it. But that said, we had about close to 100,000 users that we had to use from the bigger company to the smaller company.
Okay.
We got about 90%
Hmm.
consent and we were able to move them over. This
Right.
also has an example of how to make use of the data that you have on these existing customers. So what we did is it was only 100,000 customers. So we created a manual RFA model for these
Mhm.
users. And then
Okay.
we made sure that we incentivize the users according to how loyal they were with their previous company, how long
Sure.
they were, what was the LTV. So we have the right return on investment as well. So that
Yeah.
kind of brought them over about 90%. That was a huge success to the merger
Mhm.
story that you gave me, right? There's another
Yeah.
story that I remember from data personalization that you were talking about, like hyper personalization, right? like the publisher that you're talking about has
Yeah.
to, how you
Yeah.
showed interest in certain things and not in certain things. Another company that I was working with, we sent out this huge personalized campaign. It was our first ever personalized campaign that we sent out. We weren't sure of how users would react, but
Yeah.
somehow the email ended up in the CEO's inbox as a user, and they got back with the biggest smile, the biggest compliment, saying
Yeah.
how accurate we were with their favorites
Cool.
as a personalized email. The power of data is all about reaching the customer and make them feel that we know them. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's the story of it.
Well, you mentioned something earlier in your first example, right? Where the big consolidating to the smaller company, you spend quite a bit of time doing that.
Yeah.
For those people that are listening, initially something like that would say, gosh, that took a while. On average, right? I mean, it wasn't like it was you decided on a Tuesday to send
No.
an email out and like Thursday it was going out. How long did something like that take, and how long should people really give in order for a project like that? Because it built up over time, right?
Definitely, yes. I remember doing this project over close to 1 year. It was 100,000 base, but we wanted to make sure that the users fully understood what they were doing, fully understood what they were coming into,
Yeah,
and the services that we were offering were at least at par with what they were using previously, if not just the same.
yeah,
Um, Incentivization, obviously, that's another key for people to move across
yeah,
platforms as well, across
yeah,
companies as well. But to develop that, the strategy around it, the tactics around it, took us about a couple of months. Obviously, the merger started way ahead of time.
sure.
Though by the time we got data, it was a smaller company. Obviously, it was like a startup, so they wanted everything done yesterday.
Right.
But that said,
Yeah,
that said, we had to hold our horses because we wanted as many people come over and not rush into spending the money that we have and throw the money at users and just get as many users as we can. It was the most important decision to slow down and make sure we do the right thing.
and that's
So
important.
take your time.
Yeah, take the time. And that's important. You make a very valid point, is that we are all today all about instantaneous stuff,
Yeah,
right? I get the speed that people want to move at. They have the data. Sometimes, excuse me, sometimes the biggest hurdle is the normalization of the data and then doing the analysis of the data and then figuring out, well, then what are we going and how are we going to send this, incentivize them? What's the messaging and the tone?
yeah,
So it does the hardest part, I think, is sort of setting it up, and it can't be done overnight. No matter how big your data set is, you need to let them focus on what's really important to our customers.
absolutely.
And I think that's where sometimes organizations look at it and say, I got all this data, I can't wait 6 months, or oh my gosh, it's going to take forever to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
We
yeah,
need it done like that. And so they sort of give up and then just kind of keep doing the same thing that they're doing. But I
or
think,
get stagnant.
yeah, right. But I
Yeah,
think your experience is, hey, look, we took our time. It was really successful.
yes,
And that sometimes it does take um months, maybe a
yes,
year to sort
yeah,
of get this stuff done. And in the meantime, you can kind of keep doing some stuff in the background,
yeah, yeah,
right, to run your normal program. But
yeah,
this is where we need to slow down. And I always, someone asked me, what are the keys to success of email? And I always use the
yeah.
word patience, right?
Patience, absolutely true.
Patience,
That is
patience.
lacking, Andrew. I feel like a lot of companies lack that point. They
Yeah,
don't understand how important patience is for for your campaign to be success. So the 1 year that I
yeah,
talk about for migration, it was not just for moving the users over to this
yeah,
database. It took us a couple of hours. It's 100,000 base.
yeah,
Honestly, to move this base to that, it doesn't take that long. But to make sure that these users are your users, are truly your users, and they have the LTV that you need going
yeah,
forward and the loyalty that you need going forward,
yeah,
is the time that you need to spend on. And
yeah.
that takes patience, and that's not I don't think everyone has it, or everyone has an understanding of it.
Everyone has an understanding, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the big questions, and this is a very open-ended question, and you may have an opinion and I have an opinion, is, we look at all this stuff, we talk about the use and how you set it up, but ultimately, how should someone know when they're successful at at this? I'm curious as to your thoughts, because I've got some maybe out of the box thinking of
Yeah.
thoughts, but like, how would I Yeah, someone would say, okay, Ramya, I'm going to hire you, but like, what's the, how do I know if I'm successful or not? Tell me what you'd say to somebody like that.
I have had this question asked so many times, and
Yeah.
I've given answers that people don't like.
Yeah.
I've had that come back at me as well. But I will go ahead and say it out anyway. Success is different. It's
Mhm.
not one kind of success that you're looking at. It's not the benchmarks that you get on Google. It
Mhm.
depends on what you want out of the campaign. So I would say every campaign has its own metric of success.
Sure.
It depends on how you want to look at it, how you want the company to take the direction in.
Mhm.
That's the point of success. So again, I will go back to the welcome campaign. Your welcome campaign
Yeah.
is not just about getting as many new users into the funnel. It
Yeah.
could be different things, the way you want to look at and the way you want to nurture them going further down in life cycle. Your
Mhm.
retention campaign can look differently. You can look at just activating those inactive users once, or
Right.
you can look at activating those users for multiple purchases going forward, or you
Mhm.
could look at activating the user and then nurturing them to get to that LTV that you need. So
Mhm.
these are all different kinds of success metrics that you can look at.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not the most popular opinion apparently, but yeah, that's what I would say.
So I always go back and kind of say the same thing, but maybe in a more direct way. I would probably say, are you looking for short-term success or are you looking for long-term success? Because
Absolutely.
ultimately, if you want short-term, we could easily do that, right? I mean, that's simple. And most of the time when you see people have
Yeah.
case studies, and I'm
Yeah.
a big proponent for case studies, but I'm a proponent for case studies that talk about the long-term effects, not that, oh, well, we implemented this and we saw X percentage rise in opens or clicks or conversions or whatever it is. And they never really mentioned that it's a long tail,
Yeah.
right? More campaign based. So look, if you want an instantaneous pop, maybe, and that pop could be a week or a month. But if
Yeah.
we're talking about success and how do I know if I'm successful, is it sustainable? Is it long tail? And
Yes.
are we iteratively making improvements
Yes.
over that period of time to continue that long tail success? And so
Absolutely.
some people are like, well, I was just hoping we could get this campaign out the door for X, right? And you're
I
like,
know. I know.
totally. And I don't fault somebody for that, but I'm a long-term thinker, right? I know
Yes.
you are too, probably,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so
Yes.
let's I always tell everybody, let's take a step back and let's figure out short-term, long-term success and
Yeah.
what does that actually mean? I want to wrap it up with one additional question to you, right? You know, we hear this drum, boom, 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 beating like for the 13 years you've been in the industry and the 24 years that I've been around, about the importance of testing, right?
Yeah.
And letting it run and using data. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel about really how important testing is in the use of data.
I would say test everything as much as possible, especially if you're a new company, and you are just getting your users in. You need to learn a lot about the users that are coming to you to understand how long are they going to be with you. Do you have a competitor that is better offering? If they're likely to move, how would you know if that's the truth?
Yeah,
Testing, test different products that you have, different services that you have, the simplest of things that everyone does, subject line testing,
yeah,
content testing, dynamic testing, personalization testing. There's a ton of testing. But that said, running the test once does not give you the results that you need.
right.
Sometimes, sometimes you need to make changes on that test to keep
Correct.
understanding what the
Right.
user actually needs, what the user actually is.
Right.
Again, it's an unpopular opinion that I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
that people don't agree to, but this is what I believe in,
Yeah.
that you're testing one sort of content, like an A/B test is what we're talking about. If you split test A/B testing on content within your email, you
Yeah.
know some users like this email, like this particular content, and like the other particular content. You have a clear winner, but is your clear winner
Yeah.
telling you that your other content is not the right content for your users?
Yeah.
It is not.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know. You're only looking at the success metric of, oh, I've got so many opens, so many clicks on this content, so this is the success.
Yeah.
But what about the other one? You've spent so many hours in developing the other content, the other piece of service line for yourself as well.
Right.
Why is it bad? What is affecting these users? How can you make it better? Is
Yep.
is another angle that you have to look at during this testing.
Hmm. Um, I wrote a white paper about a year or two ago on the importance of and the economic return of testing and sort of setting up
Yeah.
testing methodology and how do you do it. And here's a testing template. And if you want a testing template, I've created one over years of experience. Um, but oftentimes I think people view testing as short term, right?
Yes.
Subject line testing. Look, I love it, right? I think you should have sort of a plan for testing and
Yeah.
short-term tests, but some longer-term tests. And that goes back to my theory, right? Around people want instantaneous stuff.
Yes.
Sometimes you sort of, and I'll quote my 22-year-old son that says, let it cook, right? Like
Yeah.
let it
Yeah.
marinate for a while to see. And then if you're noticing specific things, but
Yes.
have an end goal in mind, right? And
Yes.
if you're using data, whether it's the use of data inside of an email that goes at the top or at the bottom because you're showing them membership IDs or offers based off
Yeah.
of stuff, the placement of it, and sort of letting that marinate over a period of time. That's where the trap is, right? Is people,
Yes.
I need to show iterative, like rah rah. I go into a meeting and we did all these tests and here's the results. But then we change it. But ultimately, it boils back to this: if we use data in testing, whatever
Yeah.
sorts of data that we use, the subscriber is going to tell you what's in charge of what they are going to do. The
Yeah.
worst thing you can do is do a test, learn that the control beat the or the test beat the control, and then not implement it because
Yes.
somebody's like, well, I like this and I like that and I like the data put here, right? And then you've just basically literally thrown it out the window, right? And
Yes.
you have to sort of let the tests um, change the way that you run your email program, whether you like it or not. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen
Absolutely.
that a million times, right? We're like, change it, change it. It's gonna do amazing things. We
Yes.
just need to sort of take that step back and accept that maybe it wasn't in our head of what our
Yeah.
subscribers are.
And the best part of it is that people don't realize that tests fail.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the time.
They do.
All the
It's so
time.
hard to accept it that
Yeah.
you have a different expectation of the test that you're running, that it would
Yeah.
be the best, the most successful one. And you think you know what the customers are going to choose, but they could be totally different from what your point of view is. Because you are running a business, but
Yeah.
the user is coming to you for
Yeah.
something else altogether.
Yeah.
Your point of view is not the same point of view as a user. That's the thing that I think people miss when they run tests as well.
I-
I've gotten into conflicts with people about this, saying
yeah.
your point of view is not the point of view.
Yeah. And,
So not
and
the
at
only point of view, rather.
and at the end of the day, sometimes we just bang our heads against the wall and sort of move on, right?
Yeah.
And it definitely makes you want to jump up and down.
Yeah.
We should do it this way. Okay, so let's wrap it up. Final thoughts. If you had to sort of summarize our last 20 minutes or so of a conversation around data, how would you summarize it? And then I'll give my final points, and we'll call it a.
I just believe in one most important thing is that you can collect all the data you want, but it doesn't make sense if you don't have consent.
Mhm.
One second thing is it doesn't make sense if you are not having a two-way conversation with the user using that data. It's just a waste of resources, time, and money.
Mhm.
When you collect the data, again, I would say some ways to there are different ways to collect data, but I would again suggest a preference center.
Yeah.
The easiest way, it's low hanging fruit for most, if not all, businesses. Um, to let your customer tell you what they want to do. Let the customer tell you how many emails do they want to receive. Let the customer tell you what do they want to see. What do they like about you?
Mhm.
If they want a break, let them have a break from your emails. Just
Yeah.
because you have all of this data, just because you have all of these users, does not mean you have to bombard them with emails. You do have to bombard them with
Right.
all the kind of information that you have
Yeah.
available to the customer. I think that's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Data is
Perfect.
powerful.
Yeah.
Segmentation is powerful as long as you use it intelligently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, awesome wrap up. Here's my wrap up. If you're new to data and segmentation, go low and slow. figure
Yes.
out what you have the most data on and try to see if you can make a difference. If you're an advanced marketer and you've got all this data and you've got 38 segments, I was presenting at a conference
Yeah.
recently, and someone said I had 18 segments, 18 different variations of the email. And I was like, which one's the best? And they sort of just went, I don't know.
I know.
Simplify it, right? I'm
Yeah.
not saying low and slow. What I'm saying is simplify the amount of data that you have in order to sort of make that difference. And
Absolutely.
last but not least, if you wrap it up with a test, if you wrap it up with multiple sets or segments of data, patience. Have it,
Patience.
know it, and set yourself up not only for your team, but for
Yeah.
the people that you report to and those around you, that testing is not, and the use of data is not something that we're often that's really quick to
Yeah.
do. So look, Ramya, I really appreciate your time today, your expertise. It's been awesome. I'm so glad we were able to sort of meet and talk about the use of data. As always, everybody, we're going to put where to get a hold of her and the emailstudio.io, right? That's
Yes.
your site.
Email. It's emailstart.io. It's just studio, but
That's fine.
okay.
Look, they're gonna look at your name. They're gonna Google you. They're gonna put you up on LinkedIn. They're gonna figure it out. But we're also gonna have this information. But man, oh man, we could talk about this for hours, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's been fun. Again, I thank you for your time. It's been an honor to have you on. And until next time, everybody, continue to do what you're doing, but try something that's iterative and new. Until
Yeah.
next time,
And
everybody.
have patience. Thank you.
Patience, patience.